And the reason they had all these police officers is they're not used to people pushing back when they are lawfully acting and not in violation of the Trespass the Property Act. And so that's why they sent so many officers, is they weren't used to anybody pushing back. And thankfully you did. You got your story done, and now you've been found not guilty of all charges.
Hey, sports fans, we finally have an update to the Patrick Brown Hockey Night in Brampton saga. Now, Brown is the man who was this close to becoming Ontario Premier until a palace coup orchestrated by his own party ousted him as leader of the Progressive Conservatives. Thank God. Brown is currently the mayor of Brampton, and like so many other cities during the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic, Brampton's playgrounds and sports fields, well, they were closed to the kids, but Mayor Brown, well, he sneakily used a city-run ice facility so that he and his Barrie buddies could play pickup hockey. Talk about chutzpah. Now, for those who may have missed this outrageous example of one law for me and one law for thee, please check out the video evidence when we caught Brown red-handed.
We're getting the bum's rush, but holy mackerel, I think I see Patrick Brown himself.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
Mr. Brown, right? Yeah. David Menzies with Rebel News.
You're in a city facility?
What's that?
You're in a city facility?
Yeah, so are you.
Yeah.
So, are you playing hockey here? Or?
No, I'm just coming to check in our facility. So
Okay,
we're gonna check you. You're not supposed to be here, actually. Okay.
We were told that you play pickup here. Mr. Brown, how come the kids in Brampton can only practice sports, but your buddies can play hockey?
Yeah. So, I don't know why you are harassing people in the city of Brampton, but you shouldn't be.
Oh, who's harassing who? Your guys handed out 122 bylaw violations in 1 week. Mr. Brown, why is there a hockey game going on in this arena? I thought you're only allowed to practice sports, not play them. And who is paying the $1,000 a day, Mr. Brown, for this rink? Mr. Brown, are these taxpayer dollars being used for your buddies to play hockey on this rink? Or are you paying it? Or perhaps Waleed Solomon? So, Mr. Brown, why is it one law for me and one law for thee in this city? Mr. Brown?
Wow, talk about 2 minutes for egregious hypocrisy. But here's the thing, folks. Even when we caught Brown breaking provincial mandates and his own city's bylaws, Mayor Brown didn't care. He kept playing hockey on a weekly basis. So it was that we kept showing up at the Earnscliffe Recreation Centre to query the mayor as to why children were forbidden to set foot on a baseball diamond or a soccer field, yet he could play ice hockey to his heart's content. Well, he didn't like those questions, and instead of providing answers, Mayor Brown called the cops. Oh, yeah. Check out this footage from September 2020. Spoiler alert, I arrived at the rink's parking lot in an SUV. I left sitting in the back of a police cruiser. Check it out.
You wanting to leave then?
Arrest him or go away.
You said that there's two
Arrest him or go away, mate.
Just arrest him.
Arrest him or go away.
Okay, let's do that. This is.
I get all
This
the
is.
All right, they arrested David Menzies.
I get all the disputes.
He's in the car right now.
Sure, go ahead. Very good. Go ahead.
In the end, this is their property.
Yeah, see, David.
Amazing. So while Patrick Brown was breaking the rules by playing shinny indoors, I was arrested for practicing journalism outdoors. My crime? Trespassing. Yeah, somehow I was trespassing on the parking lot of a taxpayer-funded rec facility. How is that even a thing? Well, folks, a year and a half later, I have an update for you. Recently, we had our day in court regarding that trespassing charge, and there is indeed some good news to report. Joining me now from Ottawa is one of our legal eagles, and that would be Mr. David Amber. Hi, David, and thanks so much for joining me today.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me.
Great. So, David, you did the heavy lifting in court. How did you argue the case, and what was the verdict?
Well, first of all, I hope you feel great that you're a free man now that the charge has been withdrawn. So the matter proceeded through a number of stages of sort of an administrative court. It didn't actually go to a full trial, and I'll get to that reason why in just a moment. But the prosecutor, and there was also a justice of the peace that presided over these closed-door sessions. And the prosecutor was persuaded by me that this charge had no hope in at all of proceeding. This particular charge accused you of trespassing on public property. And in order to be found guilty of trespassing, you have to be not in the course of acting in a manner that's permitted by law. And what you were doing is you were exercising your rights under the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to do journalism. And you weren't doing it in any extreme way. You weren't trying to go back inside the property. You were outside. You weren't interfering with anybody's use of the arena. And so there really couldn't be a basis to say that you weren't in the course of exercising laws, your rights that were conferred upon you by law, that being your rights under Section 2 of the Charter.
You know, that's a great point, David, and I should point out, and you saw it in the footage that we ran of the September 2020 incident, we brought along a wonderful lawyer to essentially educate law enforcement about those charter rights, and it essentially went in one ear and out the other. Why did they ignore this advice? Because, well, the results of this charge, that tells a story. It was, tossed. But why was it when we tried to educate them on those silly things such as our charter rights and things like freedom of the press, they ignored it?
Well, David, there's certain laws in Ontario that I've found that are used by police sort of to shut the situation down, and they're not used to having people push back on it. One of those would be the Liquor License Act. When they see somebody who's acting a little unruly downtown around bar closing time, they can just, with very little chance of reviewing their discretion, just say the person looks intoxicated. And the Trespass the Property Act is another such act, where the police are used to just basically trespassing a person off the property with no discussion, no debate. But the problem again is, in your particular situation, you had a lawful right to be there. You were on public property. You were pursuing a valid story, one of some sheer hypocrisy that was going on, and quite frankly, corruption in the city of Brampton. And you were doing your job as a journalist, and the police are not used to that being an exception. So certainly they had reason to believe that you were trespassing, but it didn't really fully appreciate the whole section under the Trespass the Property Act, which does not apply to somebody who is in the course of doing something that is bestowed upon them by law, such as exercising your charter rights.
And David, let's be frank here. This was a politically motivated takedown of me that day. The very fact that you saw so many police cruisers and police officers, security guard SUVs as well, descended on the scene. I mean, it was almost like if you were watching from the street, you would think that an active shooting was going on. And again, it was this, I think, coercion and intimidation that Mayor Brown wanted to throw our way, to send a message that if you're going to commit the crime of not trespass, but ask insensitive and impolite questions, guess what? The entire squadron of cops are coming your way. I just thought it was like killing an ant with a bazooka.
Well, we're seeing this right now. There's something similar in Ottawa where Justin Trudeau finds sometimes it's inconvenient to allow democracy to function in the way that it's supposed to function. And I'm sure that Patrick Brown didn't like being asked those difficult questions and didn't like seeing you there to ask the questions. But just because democracy is inconvenient, it doesn't give people in power the basis to shut that democracy down and those democratic rights down. In this particular case, I would say that what happened was the normal city prosecutor that is appointed in Brampton was, because of the political nature, a different prosecutor took over the case. It was an outside prosecutor. She conducted herself in a very professional manner, and again, is arm's length from the city, and looked at the evidence and looked at the legal arguments and concluded that the charge would need to be withdrawn due to no prospect of conviction.
You know, that's a great point, David. There was no arguing back and forth. You didn't have to make a case. She realized that there's no there. I mean, this is not a winnable thing.
David, at first she was pushing back. I mean, there was a certain amount of argument that went on behind the scenes. There was what's called a judicial pretrial, where a justice of the peace tried to hear both sides of the issue and alert the parties to what her worship's view on the case was. And so I provided some case law from the Ontario Court of Appeal, which showed that another example of somebody exercising their rights, their freedom of expression at a town hall meeting, even if they do so in a boisterous and unruly fashion or even a loud fashion, that in and of itself does not allow the person to be trespassed off the property. And that's what was going on here. And so in fairness to the prosecutor, at first she was pushing back, but after she looked at the law, as I had set it out in a memorandum to both her and the Justice of the Peace, and after she looked at the facts of this case, she was not prepared to prosecute it.
Well, good for her for having a flip-flop in terms of going the right direction. And, you know, it's funny, too, David, in the aftermath, as I understand it, from a independent media organization, Patrick Brown was subjected to an investigation by that Brampton's Integrity Commissioner. The Integrity Commissioner is a personal friend of Patrick Brown, and the only thing he was found guilty of was not wearing a face mask while he was in a City of Brampton facility. And again, the bigger picture, as I said in my intro, David, and this is what makes it so egregious and outrageous. At Brampton's parks, you had private security SUVs staffed by security guards spying on kids that would dare use a baseball diamond, a soccer field, a cricket pitch, what have you. These security guards don't have the power to issue a bylaw infraction, but their role was to inform Brampton bylaw to hurry up, come along. There's plenty of tickets to be had. And yet, here's the mayor going indoors with his Brampton buddies, no tickets for him. It is just absolutely astonishing that this happened. What are your thoughts on this ongoing theme we see during COVID-19? And that is, it seems to be a different set of rules for the elites and the politicians and the bureaucrats as opposed to the common folk.
It's been just a wall-to-wall example of that rules for thee, but not for me, from the beginning of the pandemic until even most recently. We've seen so many examples of that. And I think one of the reasons why is that many of the politicians, and this is a problem that we have, they say things that they don't actually believe themselves. You can see that when Doug Ford is giving a press conference 90% of the time lately when he's talking about these health measures. He's like a deer in the headlights, like he's reading a script like the way a hostage would, and it's because he doesn't believe what he's saying, and the politicians don't believe that the so-called science related to a number of these measures have been in question since the beginning. And the longer this pandemic goes and the more data we get, the more it confirms that these measures haven't actually accomplished almost anything. And so they want to put these measures in to look like they're doing something, but they know that these measures don't actually prevent the spread of COVID. And so they don't feel that they need to follow it. And they feel they're too good to follow these things, and they hope they don't get caught. But thanks to journalism like you are doing, politicians have gotten caught time and time again during this pandemic. And that has been a very important role in keeping our public figures to account.
Yeah, so much for that chestnut. We're all in this together. I think that supplanted the check is in the mail as the most uttered lie in the history of mankind. One last thing, David. What I found disturbing, too, about this was the number of cops sent for this takedown. Just days before, there were some murders in the city of Brampton. You would think that's where the police would be directing their resources, not for some dumb journalist in a parking lot asking questions with no intention to harm anyone, unless being impolite to a mayor is a criminal code violation. Last word goes to you, my friend.
I think I'll just say it again. This is one of those laws where the bylaw officers and the police officers in the province of Ontario use the Trespass the Property Act as sort of a shut down any discussion, any debate, and that's supposed to be the end of it. You pushed back, and you pushed back lawfully and reasonably. You did so on the sidewalk of the recreation center, not disturbing anybody in terms of using the recreation center, not going in. When you had gone in that one time, you kept your distance, you wore a mask. So you acted totally reasonably. And the reason they had all these police officers is they're not used to people pushing back when they are lawfully acting and not in violation of the Trespass the Property Act. And so that's why they sent so many officers, is they weren't used to anybody pushing back. And thankfully you did. You got your story done, and now you've been found not guilty of all charges.
Fantastic. Well, David, I want to thank you so much. You got another win in your docket there. And again, if I'm ever arrested at a recreational facility in the city of Brampton, I know what lawyer to go to right away. Thank you so much for joining me, sir.
Thanks for having me, David.
The cops here in Ottawa don't seem that concerned that Alexa Lavoie was shot point blank with a tear gas canister for absolutely no reason, unless, of course, in Justin Trudeau's Ottawa of 2022, practicing independent journalism is a crime. Maybe it is. In any event, we're not sitting down when it comes to this. We are going to launch a legal challenge. So if you'd like to kick in to help Alexa pay her legal fees, please go to standwithalexa.com. That's standwithalexa.com. And if you can contribute $1 or $2, we would greatly appreciate that.